So yeah, the nitty-gritty of the story is that after Roe v. Wade, it's like 3 days after Roe v. Wade was overturned, there was a girl that went to a hospital in Ohio. Ohio had what I believe was one of the trigger laws, and they call it the heartbeat bill, and it basically bans abortion before 6 weeks. 6 weeks or before. If you hit 6 weeks or after, you can't get an abortion, unless the situation is one of which the mother's life is in danger. They do not have a exception for rape or incest or anything like that. It's either your life is in danger or you're having the kid. A 10-year-old shows up at a health clinic, and she is 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant, something like that. So she's just like just over the threshold where it's completely legal for her to have an abortion. There is some arguments from the right that the Ohio law doesn't actually ban abortions in those situations, which basically hinges on the idea that the little girl's life would have been in danger should she carry the pregnancy to term. But for one, even though it probably would be incredibly dangerous for the little girl to carry the pregnancy to term and to have the baby, it's not necessarily going to be a life-threatening situation. There are apparently not many, but every year there are apparently 10-year-olds who have babies in America. So that's not necessarily true, what they say. But their overall response to this entire thing has been just like one huge debacle. And it kind of reminds me of the situation where the right was lying about the Arlington student that was raped in the bathroom, where they made it seem like it was because of the trans bathroom bill, when it wasn't. They just got it wrong on so many levels, and it's crazy to see. So I'm going to start here. The first thing they tried to do was claim that that it was fake. And those outlets that weren't claiming that it was fake, at the very least, kind of alluded to it. So if they weren't explicit by it, they were at least implicitly claiming it was fake. So this one right here, I'm not going to read it, but 10-year-old rape victim's abortion leaves numbers of glaring questions. Yeah, here it is. Even liberal newspapers like the Washington Post could not get any new information from Bernard. Bernard is the Indianapolis clinician that actually gave the little girl treatment after they crossed state lines. She's the one that broke the story to whichever news agency was the one that posted it. The Post fact checker Glenn Kessler noted in his column Washington Post that Indianapolis Star, it's called the Indianapolis Star, story did not meet the basic journalistic standards. But if you actually read what this guy actually says, I'm not going to read the whole thing. He's got a little synopsis. The bottom line, this is a very difficult story to check. Bernard is on the record, but obtaining documents or other confirmation is all but impossible without details that would identify the localities where the rape occurred. With news reports around the globe and now presidential impromptu, however, the story acquires status of a fact no matter its prevalence. If a rapist is ever charged, that fact finally would have more solid grounding. Basically, the Washington Post didn't say that it didn't meet the minimum standards of journalistic integrity. Not only that, if you actually read the story, I'll have it linked. I'll have all this linked in the description of the YouTube video, and I'm going to post it in my Discord too. if you actually read the original story, it's the portion about the 10-year-old isn't even the main portion. That's more just like an anecdote that was used at the beginning of the story to kind of grab people's attention. So like the idea that it wasn't very well fact-checked in the original story might be somewhat true, but before you go and write hit pieces trying to claim that it didn't happen, you should probably do a little bit of fact-checking yourself, because holy fuck, did you get this wrong? There's another one. I don't know why I didn't already have it pulled up, but we're gonna watch this. Okay, so this is basically proof that Tucker Carlson basically denied 100% that they were lying about this situation. So this is a very short clip. I wish I could have found the full clip. I couldn't. He could have been talking about something specific, but I think that the portion about the little girl was at least in context from the beginning. I'm not sure what he said afterwards, but I think there's enough here to solidly claim that Tucker Carlson was denying the story of the 10-year-old little girl in Ohio.
So what does it tell us that politicians are lying about this? Can you imagine? And why did the Biden administration, speaking of lying, just...
So right there is what makes me think that the context is all the way there, at least from the beginning, because he said, speaking of lying, which means that he's sort of changing the subject right now to a different example, which is the Biden administration and the 10-year-old girl.
Repeat a story about a 10-year-old child who got pregnant and then got an abortion, or was not allowed to get an abortion, when it turns out the story was not true. And by the way, when a 10-year-old gets pregnant, the first question is not, how do we get rid of the kid? The first question is, where's the rapist? Where's the rapist? Allison said to Font.
So where's the rapist is a very good question to ask in these types of situations, but also like the health of the child that is pregnant, the whether or not she's able to get care, that's also a very good question, which for some reason the right doesn't really care about. But yeah, so to sum this little section up, we have multiple sources, right-wing sources, basically casting doubt on this story, which is despicable. I'm not sure why you would just cast doubt on the story like this unless you've got a political narrative, a political agenda, which they clearly seemed to have had. And here is Representative Jim Jordan, who also called it a lie, and he deleted a tweet afterwards. I'm amazed at this is Bob Gibbs. I'm amazed that a 10-year-old got pregnant. You really wrestle with that. That one's a tough one. Representativity says, I can't imagine being 10 years old and pregnant at 18. I don't think we even able to have children. Where's the ones about Jim Jordan? Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost, a Republican, said the story was likely fabricated. Representative Jim Jordan, R of Ohio, tweeted, "Another lie, any surprise," in response to a Washington Examiner story about Yost saying he had found no evidence of the young rape victim. So there's that. Something else that I found was that the Republican Attorney General in Ohio said that he'll be investigating the Indiana doctor who provided care to a 10-year-old rape victim. So this narrative basically revolves around the idea that she didn't report the possible abuse, which they are required to do. I heard that she did. I actually didn't get a chance to look it up, but regardless, like, why is this what you're focusing on? Whether or not the doctor reported it, like, why is this your focus? So Jim Jordan is one of the more despicable examples of this, and the reason why I say that is Jim Jordan tweeted, "Another lie, anyone surprised?" in response to a Washington Examiner story about Yost saying he had found no evidence of young rape victim. Scrolling down, After the person was caught and he was asked whether he regretted calling the story a lie, Jim blamed Fuentes, an undocumented immigrant, and the news media. "We didn't know that an illegal alien did the heinous act. We never doubted the child." Yes, you did. You absolutely did. Jordan said. "The lie was the news headline, the headline from your profession. We doubted you, Joe Biden, which is usually a smart thing to do. But we didn't know that it was this illegal immigrant had done this terrible thing. He should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." Okay, so this guy didn't jump on board with believing this girl until he found out it was a fucking illegal immigrant. It's now believable because the story is that it's an illegal immigrant, which is true. That seems to be the case, is that it was an illegal alien. But like, what the fuck does that have to do with the believability of this story? That's what's mind-boggling to me. It's now politically convenient. Now he has an angle that he can attack illegal aliens with, and so now it's all of a sudden true. I don't, and I'm not even sure what headlines he's talking about, because if you look at the original story, the headline, it has nothing to do with the little girl, and even if it did, it wouldn't be wrong. Patients head to Indiana for abortion services as other states restrict care. Indiana. Did I say Indiana? Yeah, that's it. Okay. So the part about a 10-year-old is this little part right here. That's the only part that's about the 10-year-old. The only reason it's getting national news the way it is because the president brought it up. Although I did hear about it on the, I think Bew of the Fifth column reported on this before the president brought it up, and it was probably all over Twitter. I'm not on Twitter, so all right. The last and final thing is going to be this Tucker Carlson segment.
Human beings only.
Okay, so this is after they found out that there was somebody taken into custody, and he has a guest on that says so many things that are wrong, and he just sits there with that dumbass look on his face the entire time, doesn't challenge him at all, because Tucker Carlson either doesn't know or doesn't care. He's either a fucking idiot or a grifter. Those are the only two options that he really has at this point.
Exist to the extent they can be used for partisan ends, so it shouldn't surprise you that on Friday he used the story of a 10-year-old rape victim to push for more abortion.
Okay, so he's feigning disgust at Biden using the 10-year-old rape victim for the abortion discussion. The 10-year-old rape victim is an example of how horrendous these laws can be, how much of an effect these laws can have on some of our country's most vulnerable people. You would think that the party of libs of TikTok, where they're posting teachers talking about how they're non-binary and calling that grooming, and talking about how much they need to save the children from these non-binary people, you would think that party would be more concerned about the effect that their policies are having on 10-year-old children. But they aren't. If it doesn't suit their agenda, they don't care. Furthermore, if you look at something like the Arlington rape, that the right tried to use to push, and did use to push, their anti-transgender narrative that turned out to be factually incorrect. That was abhorrent. That was disgusting. This is just showing the reality of Republican policy.
According to Joe Biden, the laws in Ohio forced a 10-year-old rape victim to flee to Indiana to get that abortion. Now, the White House never vetted the facts of that story. It's the President of the United States saying things that no one checked, but the facts didn't make any sense. On Monday, for example, the Attorney General of Ohio said there would not be a reason for this child to flee to Ohio in the first place. Watch.
Ohio's heartbeat law has a medical emergency exception, broader than just the life of the mother, This young girl, if she exists and if this horrible thing actually happened to her, it breaks my heart to think about it. She did not have to leave Ohio to find treatment.
So I did some research on that claim. That seems to be wrong. Let's see if I can find the link. We'll go to this one, and like I said, all of this will be in the description of the YouTube video, and I will post it in my Discord. I'm going to make a new channel for sources. Attorney General said 10-year-old rape victim could have had an abortion in Ohio, but the state law wasn't clear. So basically, the nitty-gritty of this is that the medical accession doesn't clearly apply to the girl and would leave the medical staff vulnerable to fifth-degree felony charges. That's in the source that I just posted. I'm not going to actually find it to show on stream, but you can click the link and find it yourself. Not only that, there's something in here about it's for medical emergencies, and the way it's defined means that, like, if she had time to go across the state for this abortion, it probably wouldn't have qualified as an emergency. That's also in this source. And it wasn't hard for me to find these things. I didn't take a bunch of time finding my narrative in Google. It was incredibly easy. It took me like an hour to find all this shit.
So the obvious headline here was not about abortion. It was about the crime committed against a child. Who raped a 10-year-old? That was our first question. Nobody seemed interested.
That was your first question, but that wasn't your first reaction, Tucker. We just watched that segment, and your first reaction was to call the story a lie. So don't give us that shit.
At all in learning who this person was.
I would assume that the president and the people that were talking about this would assume that people were on this. At the time when the president talked about this, when this story first broke, we didn't know who it was at the time, and that's going to be important later.
And maybe there was a reason for that. In fact, there was another moral to the story. Apparently, the rapist was an illegal alien. The Columbus.
Why is that a moral, Tucker? Why is his immigration status important in this story? The more important aspects, much more important aspects of this story is that the little girl was raped and she couldn't get care in your state, in Ohio, in the state that she lived in because of Republican policies. That is a very big story. The fact that it was an illegal immigrant isn't relevant at all to this. What if it hadn't been? Do you think that 10-year-olds don't get raped by people that aren't illegal? I would imagine, and I guarantee, I put money on it. I would put any amount of money that little girls get raped more often by people who aren't illegal in this country than people who are.
This dispatch is reporting tonight that a 27-year-old called Gershon Fuentes occasions. Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow with the Hoover Institution, and we're happy to have him join us tonight. Professor, thanks so much for coming on. So what do you take from this story?
Well, it's a tragic story, Tucker, but it gets more mysterious every day because apparently...
So they're still trying to cast doubt on the story. It gets more mysterious every day. Why is it more mysterious? It seems like it's clearing up. It seems like that it's more obvious that this happened.
This terrible, horrendous act was reported on the 22nd or nearabouts in June. And here we are on July 13th, 14th, and we're only now, this perpetrator apparently was not charged or arraigned.
Yeah, so the reason for that is because they didn't catch him until the 12th. I did the math on, I've got that source also. It's going to be in the description. You just got to look at the day of the article because they said, and subtract 2 days, and you'll get when he actually turned himself in. So you're just like, why is this a question? It took me 5 minutes to find this. Why couldn't the president of the Hoover Institute find this before you went on Tucker Carlson? You're either dumb or you're grifting.
And yet people knew that he had coerced a young, maybe at the time, a 9-year-old to be pregnant. And so the question is, why now, at this belated date, are we learning who he was? And maybe, I mean, a naive might say, well, it was because people had questioned the veracity of the story, and people, for whatever nebulous reasons, didn't want to reveal his identity until revealing his identity was the only mechanism for substantiating
Again, they didn't know who he was until the 12th.
The story in the first place. But in that time, it seems like a person who had a proclivity to have, coercive sex with minors was still out there. And we don't know what he was doing. He should have been, as soon as they reported the act, he should have been arraigned immediately. And then the next thing was, the Attorney General mentioned the heartbeat law at 6 weeks. But the abortionist who became the spokesman for the story said, well, the abortion was done 6 weeks and 3 days. I mean, why was it so close to that date? It was almost as if you knew about this act, you had a
Why was it so close to the date? What? Why is that a question? Why is that important? I don't understand. The only reason for this question is to try and cast doubt on this story.
A method inside Ohio, if you believe that that was a proper course, it would have been legal within 6 weeks rather than to go over to Indiana and then be told, well, it was 6 weeks and 3 days. It doesn't, all of these details, they reek of a political.
She didn't go to the doctor until after 6 weeks and 3 days. She didn't go to Indiana. She might have went the same day. I don't know. But she didn't go to the doctor in Ohio until 6 weeks and 3 days.
Weaponization of the case, which is tragic because we have a 9-year-old, I guess at the time of the act, she was 9, and she's being used for political purposes, which is terrible. And then we have this perpetrator.
Why does he think she was 9 at the time of the act? Where the fuck is he getting this shit from? I mean, it's possible. I guess within those 6 weeks and 3 days from when she got pregnant and she actually went to the doctor, she could have had a birthday. But why does he think that that's like...
And now we learn that he is here illegally from Guatemala, and he's residing illegally, and no one has, the act was reported, and for almost 3 weeks, he hasn't been charged. So we're gonna have to wait.
Because they didn't know who it was.
For more details, but it's mysterious. It's terrible what's going on.
So it sounds like in this case, as in pretty much every case we've reported on for the past 5 years, the first version was a lie.
Not true. Calling it a lie was a lie, but there's nothing about the first version that was a lie.
Everything is partisan propaganda, and kind of believe nothing at first. Maybe that's the takeaway.
It reminds me a lot of the whipping story that Joe Biden also...
It reminds me much more of the Arlington story, where the right lied to push their political agenda.
...promulgated about Border Patrols whipping people, and we found out only later that it wasn't true at all, and then there were desperate efforts to bring in more evidence to sort of incriminate them to save the reputation of the president. So I think what's happened is this fellow was finally charged when they needed some substantiation of this story, but they seemed reluctant to charge him quicker and almost immediately because they felt the story would be believable and be useful on its own merits. And then when people...
They didn't charge him until he confessed. Like they brought him in, he confessed, and then they charged him on the 12th.
Questioned it and wanted details. Only then did they start releasing the details, which caused only more mystery. But the whole thing I think it's terrible because it shows you that people are using a 10-year-old and protecting, in some cases, an illegal alien, if that happened to be true, that they deliberately delayed arraigning him until they needed evidence to substantiate this useful story. It's
right.
Terrible.
What's terrible is the right denying this story and continuing to cast doubt on this story to push their political agenda. Okay, so one more thing. There is I saved the best one for last. So there's this guy named Jim Bopp. He's an Indiana lawyer who authored the model legislation in advance of the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. So he was basically asked, under his law that he modeled, what would happen to the 10-year-old girl? Would she have had a place to go? And this was his response. She would have had the baby. And as many women who have, first of all, he's calling this 10-year-old child a woman. So that kind of shows you where the conservative mindset on this one is. Who have had babies as a result of rape. We would hope that she would understand the reason and ultimately the benefit of having the child. So this is the guy that wrote the model of the legislation of the proposed Indiana bill after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. That's saying this shit. This is where the Republican Party is.